Kia ora guys and welcome back to the Black Jersey. My name's Max, I'm the host over here at this channel, and thank you once again to my patrons for giving your support to this channel. Well, it was all destiny. It was looking like it was set in the stars for the French to face the Irish in the 2023 Rugby World Cup final. They were the two teams who had done the most for World Rugby in the last 4 years. They proved that actually, yes, rugby is alive. You can play expensive rugby. You just have to do a lot of work behind the scenes and put a lot of structure into it to entertain your fans, to thank them for coming to the games. But simply put, they just choked against South Africa. They were very dominant at the breakdown. They were very good against them, but they choked and they lost by 1 point at home. And so what I'm going to do for today's video is I'm going to discuss what the heck happened with France, a few factors for losing, as I've previously went over in my analysis video. You can see down below in the pinned comments about how they got defeated by the Springboks. Just remember as well to subscribe to me and like this video if you enjoy my channel. I'm now going to pull up these factors for losing before we go over where they go from here, and of course what they could look like in 2027. So first off, Ramos's charged down conversion, I think that one goes without saying. There was also the factor of him missing a penalty in the first half as well, so he missed 2 goals during that game, and France lost by, of course, 1 point. If Ramos was able to get those over, well, I know how the score margin would have looked because of that. But simply put, you can't always expect this to be the way things are going to go. Because when kicks go over, blah, 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 it can change the momentum of the game. It can change the mentality of the opposition. So I'm not just going to blankly say, oh, it's Thomas Ramos' fault, he cost them the game. Because simply put, France had far more time, they had another 50 minutes or so to correct these mistakes from Ramos. One player doesn't always just cost things for the team. It's just not a simple game. And as we saw in my analysis video, South Africa did a really good job at catching France between attack and between defence. That was where a lot of those issues for the French were coming from. So France were really just struggling to catch South Africa when they were kicking during that transition between attack and defence. We'll see several times in that video I've linked in the description. Thomas Ramos coming through to attack, he has to move back into the backfield. BLBRD, Peno caught in the exact same problems. Woki, for example, the reason he was all the way across on the far side of the pitch, he was covering for the backfield and the fact that those guys were, still leaving their attacking stance. That's where things were going wrong. So tactically going forward for France, they are going to have to do a bit of work of, what do we do when we're transitioning between attack and defence? What can we do in our attack setup that, I guess, makes it a bit more bulletproof? What's going to help us in terms of, things getting messed up? What are we going to do if the attack structure, for example, doesn't fire? We can't just have a plan B, C, D for the attack. We also have to have a plan A and B for going from attack to defence. That's the mentality I'm hoping Fabien Galthié is going to look at. I hope he's not just going to do an Eddie Jones and not bother watching the highlights of the 2019 Rugby World Cup final. As well, the selections, a bit questionable, of course. Dupont and Jelonch came back from injury, pretty serious injuries, straight away into the starting lineup. Antoine Dupont during the 2023 Six Nations, he tore his ACL, he had surgery on that, and he came back early 6 months after the injury rather than 9 months. Simply put, why would he do it? He wasn't the same player when he came back. He lacked tenacity, he looked mentally fragile, he looked very unsure of what to do on the pitch. And when players aren't mentally in there, you know what I mean? It's a lot harder to play. Dupont as well, having, that huge tackle to his face from Johan Dazel, the Namibian captain, having surgery on his cheekbone, playing with a scrum cap, that was very risky as well. And Dupont, at probably 70-80%, he probably should have come off for Maxime Lucu, but with Fabien Galthié possibly playing favourites a bit, this really didn't go the way it should have gone. And Lucu, with the telepathic understanding with Jalabert, could have come along, calmed Jalabert down. This didn't happen. There's also the fact that, Dorian Aldegheri getting smashed at the scrum. I thought before the test match that was a pretty questionable selection, but he got smashed and Oxenshire just absolutely terrorised Dorian Aldegheri in that second half. Jalabert, as I said, he really wasn't dealing with the pressure too well. He was playing throughout 2023 like a World Cup winning 10. He may not have the telepathic understanding with Dupont, but he's a big talker. He screams into his ear a lot. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows how to read the pitch. He's a very, very astute tactician, but pressure in defence, that's why Romain Ntamack starts when he's fit over Jalabert, because Ntamack is more trustworthy on defence, and he's more calm under pressure already at just 24 years old. And Jalabert, because Francois Cross and Yoram Moefana were on the bench and not Melvin Jaminet, well, they couldn't bring off Mathieu Jalabert. France were just trying to cover with that 6-2 split, having Sekou Makalu there, Cross on the bench instead of, Jalonche, and with Moefana doing the same thing as Cross and as, Sekou Makalu, centre, midfield, winger, all covered. Why were you thinking that? Why were you doing that, Galtier? Silly decision. And so Moefana on the bench pretty much left them as sitting ducks. They couldn't take off the 10 who wasn't dealing with the pressure. And so with all these mistakes, where do France go from here? Well, simply put, Winnie Antonio and Romain Taufifenua, who I have in the picture, they're going to be retiring from international rugby, so they've played their last test matches for France. Simply put, they need to recall Demba Bamba to replace Winnie Antonio, because Demba Bamba, who went to 2019, he was really, really cruelly missing out in 2023. Very high work rate, very, very good scrummager, so hopefully he's going to get a recall and prove everyone wrong as to why he got dropped. There's also the locking factor. Thibaut Flamont, Cameron Wokey, excellent players, but they're definitely going to be lacking a bit of power in lock with, Taufifenua going. Didn't help that Paul Willems got ruled out from the World Cup due to injury either. So, solution. Emmanuel Miafol, who was born in Auckland, is about to become eligible for France. Just pick him straight away. He's a turnover king. He's got this will to win that you cannot coach. You see him carrying, and hopefully in a few years, Posolo Tuolangi is going to be ready for international selection as well. Timing things, his line-out jumping, losing a bit of fat may be a good thing for Tuolangi before he gets capped, but in a few years, there's no reason that Posolo Tuolangi isn't going to be in the French team. Bastien Chalureau is 31. He's getting on, so you've got to replace him with somebody. And he's only got 7 test caps himself. So replacing him, Posolo Tuolangi in a few years' time, that's exactly the way to go. If Charles Olivon, for example, does end up retiring as well, I think maybe moving, Wolke back to blindside would be a good idea as well. Also, France, what they need to do is they need to pick a backup number 8, because it hurt them, man. Aldred is the only specialist of the World Cup. It really did hurt them. Yohan Tanga, though, probably isn't the answer. So looking at Paul Boudihon to cover both 6 and 8, I think probably isn't going to cut it though either. They need Paul Boudihon to specialise as a reserve number 8. That's what France need to do. Because, things could have been really, really bad for them. Galtier didn't really give all his second, third, fourth choice players a decent enough opportunity. So that, I think, is probably going to be good for them as well. And, of course, Emilien Gailleton in the midfield, he has got to be picked. Come on, guys. It needs to happen. Arthur Vincent, in the reserve for midfield, they probably need a bit more of an attacking weapon than him. Vincent's a good defender, but when it comes to the attack, that's, I think, what France are needing a bit more of. They probably need a bit more of a spark in that 13 jersey, to be honest. And, of course, Aldeguerri, Hastoy, I think those two need to go. Hastoy was terrible against Uruguay. He simply finds the step up between test and club level a bit too difficult. And I've talked about Aldeguerri already. Julien Marchand is looking like a player who is definitely past his best as well. So if Marchand can't return to form, I think dropping him will be a good idea as well. And we're about to go through a Eurosport article to show why I think this, but I also think it would be good to strip Dupont of the captaincy and hand it to Gregory Aldred. Aldred doesn't make a crazy amount of key decisions for that team, though he's one of those key decision makers in the spine. He mostly is used in the middle of the pitch for some very robust carries, so aside from the scrum, he's not really doing too much in terms of deciding the team structure. Aldred is also a player who deals with pressure really well. He's about to get 50 tests, so I think while Dupont is off playing sevens, handing the captaincy to Aldred would be a good idea, as he's more of a guarantee to get to 2027 than Charles Olivon is, because Olivon is has had a few injuries. Olivon in his debut at captain had only played 11 tests previously because he's been injured so many times. Anyway, as for the article, the headline is that it will say that Toulouse will let Antoine Dupont miss club season as scrum half targets France 7th spot at Paris Olympics. Toulouse are willing to let Antoine Dupont fulfill his Olympic dream, according to head coach Hugo Mola. And so when the head coach himself is saying this, I think it's safe to say that Dupont is going to get a bit more refreshed. Dupont is expected to play a key part in France's bid to win the Rugby World Cup when they host the tournament in October. This is an early article from this year, of course. But the star scrum half is keen to represent France in the sevens format of the game and earn a place in the country squad for next year's Summer Games in Paris. So with Dupont gone, I think that's ultimately going to be quite good for him. Antoine Dupont isn't the same player he was this time last year or a few years ago or so. I still picked him in this year's Six Nations team in the tournament because he's still playing very well, but I don't think he's the best 9 in the world anymore. He's looking like a guy who's a bit stressed out, not quite enjoying the game. He's looking like a guy with a lot of pressure on his shoulders, so I think moving over to sevens just for that little wee while is going to be really good for his mental health, to sharpen him up. Potentially it won't run the risk of his ego becoming inflated as well, because when you're all over the posters everywhere, that's a possible thing. But there are a lot of French players who could still be around for 2027, including Dupont. It's just that when Dupont is taking on so much responsibility for the team, perhaps stripping him of the captaincy and allowing him a bit more liberty for his decision makers, not putting that much pressure on him, it's going to be better for him, and it'll allow him to be in 2027 as an even better player. In the front row, Piato Malvaca, Sepeli Falatia, they're both going to be 30 years old. Jean-Baptiste Gros is going to be a world-class player by then as well at 28, and Reda Wadi could still be around at 32 years old. So even with Antonio retiring, there's a decent amount of front rowers who are looking good and stuff like that. Cyril Bay maybe not a guarantee at 34, but at lock there are also 3 players who are there. Paul Willems, I think, is probably a bit more likely than Cyril Bay to be there, as locks are quite a bit harder to find than props are. Props are just abundant over in France, you know what I mean? Walkie and Flamand as well, I think they'll have 50 tests by then. They're going to be even better. The loose forwards, Gregory Aldrit, Paul Boudihon and Francois Cross, I think are pretty likely, but Charles Olivon at 34, maybe. The thing is though, if he avoids injury, he's guaranteed to be there. He's excellent. So if he avoids injury, he's turning up. It's as simple as that. The halves as well, Dupont, Kuyu, Jalabert, Intermac. I think that one goes without saying, doesn't it? But they've still got so much energy left in the tank, those guys. It's crazy. The midfield as well, Gael Fiku, he's put on a lot of miles on the clock, but considering how things have gone, considering he was 18 in his test debut, he's been a player who across his history has been able to reinvent himself several times. He's played for several different teams at club level, so the fact that he's got this willingness to constantly reinvent himself, I think is going to leave him able to still be playing at 33 years old. Yura Moefana as well. Unless someone else moves to 12 like Fiku himself, with Peno going to 13, I think Yura Moefana is probably going to become the successor to Jonathan Danty at 12. Louis Biel-Biardi as well, he's still going to be 24 years old. It's scary to think how good he's going to get. There may be a spot as well for Ethan Dumortier at 26 if, he's still at the top level. Damien Penaud, I think, is probably a bit more likely to move over to midfield where he prefers to play, as he's going to be 31, but he's going to be there for sure because of how world-class he is. Thomas Ramos and Melvin Jaminet, fullbacks do tend to last a bit longer than wingers do, and Ramos is kind of just finding that extra gear right now. So, why can't Ramos go up a few more gears? So France have plenty of players that are going to be left around for 2027. It's clear what they messed up. It's clear things that they have to improve on. And so the big question is, will Fabien Galtier be able to nail these things they have to work on? Well, guys, find out in the comments section, find out in the future, share your ideas down below, and let's just continue this discussion even further. Do remember as well to like this video and subscribe to me if you enjoyed it. You can also support me over on Instagram and over on Patreon if you're a big fan of me. Just remember, only do Patreon if you can afford it, because it is a cost of living problem right now. Don't go crazy, guys, okay? Enjoy the rugby, enjoy the off season for my fellow Kiwis, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. from Max.